Umi is a field spell card that increases the attack and defense of all fish, sea serpent, thunder, and aqua monsters on the field by 200, but also reduces the attack and defense of all machine and pyro monsters on the field by 200. This card is like many other field spells, like Mountain, Sogen, Wasteland, Yami, and Forest, providing small buffs and debuffs to many of the game's types during the early days of the game. But it is also not like these field spells, because where they all faded into the background radiation of the game, remembered only by the most Yu-Gi-est of boomers and Duel Links day oneers, one legendary duelist made it his mission to make sure that the denizens of the deep had a place to call their own, changing with the times to adapt to several different species and creatures from across the 7 seas. And thanks to one intrepid Quasar commander from my Patreon, it's time we gave these creatures their due. So get on your swimwear, put on your scuba gear, and get ready to feel the pressure, cause it's time for Umi Explained. Today's episode is brought to you by my lovely patrons, as well as the wonderful people over at Dragon Shield. Get the sleeves as strong as dragon scales and save 5% on your order by using coupon code GoldenNova at checkout. So what's the deal with Umi? Well, that's a very broad topic. Some cards rely on it entirely for their effects, some are specifically related to everyone's favorite freaky fish guy, while others are archetypes who have cards that emulate the name. As such, this episode is going to be comprised of a bunch of mini explains, covering all of these categories in detail. But to whet our appetites, let's start with one that's a little goofy. Ground Attacker BUGROTH is a level 4 Earth Machine normal monster with 1500 attack and 1000 defense. It's a surface battle robot that was once used for sea warfare. We even get to see that original form in Amphibious BUGROTH, a level 5 water aqua fusion monster with 1850 attack and 1300 defense, requiring Ground Attacker BUGROTH and Defender of the Sea as material. So far, not really lining up with our giant body of water directly, but do reflect the mechanics of the field spell. Amphibious is an aqua, so it belongs in the water and is helped by Umi, but the ground attacker version is a legit machine, not set up for deep sea combat, so it loses those stats. But the connection goes from implied to direct with Amphibious BUGROTH Mark III, a level 4 water machine monster with 1500 attack and 1300 defense, and while Umi is face up on the field, this card can attack your opponent directly. This lets you get in for a bit of chip damage, but Umi actively makes it worse because, as a machine, it loses attack. Now, granted, Umi itself has been figuratively, and literally, power crept since its release, so we do have a version that gives us the direct attack benefit and actually gives us a boost, but in context of the original, it's a very funny trade-off. And this new form of Umi would also be instrumental in the usage of Amphibious BUGROTH Mark 11, a level 5 water machine monster with 1850 attack and 1500 defense. While Umi is not on the field, this card gains 700 attack but cannot attack directly. And while Umi is on the field, you can target a face-up non-water monster on the field and destroy it. This is a really interesting take on the formula so far because it has different strengths and weaknesses depending on if it's on land or in the sea, able to launch its water-to-air missiles while submerged, and unleashing the rest of its artillery while on land. But despite the massive power boost when it's out of the water, because it's a level 5 water monster, there's a lot of reasons to just play it in the Umi-related decks because it gives you a backup plan in case that field spell gets bumped off. The BUGROTH line has been a part of the game since the very beginning, and with the latest support coming out 2 years ago after a long hiatus, I think it's time they got the old archetype gets a modern rework treatment. I mean, how else are we gonna know what happened between March 3 and 11? Next up, let's cover our cards that don't really have a unifying theme behind them beyond being Umi Support, as well as covering the number of cards that take on the name. Quick honorable mention goes to Umi Ruka, a field spell that buffs water monster attacks by 500 but decreases their defense by 400. It's not an Umi card, but it would feel strange not to bring it up at all. Our first real example is one that has a lot to talk about though. A Legendary Ocean is a field spell card that is always treated as Umi. All water monsters on the field gain 200 attack and defense, and reduce the levels of all water monsters in both players' hands and on the field by 1. This is basically the de facto version of Umi that's played in place of every other kind. Being a level 5 water monster, kind of like Amphibious BUGROTH Mark 11, may as well come with a big sign that says, "I'm part of the vaguely defined water pile," effectively making it a normal summonable level 4 monster. And yeah, I said in place of. Not just because it's better than Umi in basically every way that matters, you literally cannot play 3 copies of both cards in the same deck. See that parenthetical text up there that says this is always treated as Umi? This effect reaches beyond the boundaries of the game itself, affecting the card even during the deck building process. This means if you put 3 of this and original Umi in your deck, you will have 6 copies of Umi, which is in violation of every deck building rule, and you'll be kicked out of the event you're playing in. Though, there is an interesting exception to this. Warrior of Atlantis is a level 4 water aqua monster with 1900 attack and 1200 defense that you can discard from your hand to the grave to add a copy of a legendary ocean from your deck to your hand. This is one of the many monster field spell searchers from back in the day, sharing company with Gravekeeper's Commandant and elemental hero Captain Gold. The problem here arises when you look at what it searches. I mean, we all see a card named a legendary ocean, but remember, it's always treated as Umi, so there shouldn't ever be a legal target for Warrior to grab. Now, it does work that way because Konami said so, and it kinda makes sense. This won't be the only card that acts as Umi all the time, and making this a searcher for any of those cards would be a balancing nightmare later in the game's development, or at the very least, a big annoyance. But, you know, I wouldn't have it any other way. Strange interactions and rules like this are part of what gives Yu-Gi-Oh! Its very particular flavor, and a legendary ocean will factor into a lot of design moving forward, elevating it to the status of a legendary field spell. Not to mention a big example as to why you don't build your big vanity projects on the coastline while global warming is happening. The original builders must be kicking themselves after Aquaman scooped this up for a steal. Lemuria, the Forgotten City, is a field spell card that is also always treated as Umi. All water monsters gain 200 attack and defense, and once per turn, during your main phase, you can have all water monsters you currently control gain levels equal to the number of water monsters you currently control until the end phase. The field spell ties into the Mermail archetype, the one theme I've decided to not cover this episode. They deserve one all their own. Granted, the specific connections of this being their home comes from master guides and solo modes, but the effect also lines up with their playstyle, modulating levels in a way that allows them to access higher ranked Xyz monsters. And thankfully, this works with any water monster, so there's a lot of experimenting you can get done with this. Off the top of my head, I like that this can take any 2 frogs and make them level 4, so you can access that ridiculous toolbox. And any 2 level 4 waters becoming level 6 means you have easy access to Beatrice, a famously fair and balanced card. But, like the sea, power creep is a cruel mistress, and decks that wanted to Xyz summon would come with their own ways to modulate in-engine if they needed it, which meant a field spell that doesn't have any other immediate impact once it hits board was, well, forgotten about. Forgotten Temple of the Deep is a continuous trap card, and while this card is on the field, its name becomes Umi. Once per turn, you can target a level 4 or lower fish, sea serpent, or aqua type monster you control, a trio I affectionately call the Archetypes, and banish that target. And during your end phase, special summon the monsters banished by this effect. Important note, because this only counts as Umi while on the field, this will not clash with how many copies of Umi you can run in your deck. Kind of like how you have all different kinds of cyber dragons in your deck because they only count as that on the field or in the grave. This card is reminiscent of the Banish Fish series of monsters, who love doing a thing and then bouncing off the board only to return later. And this lets you use that on a number of different monsters. You can phase them out to dodge targeted interaction, keep them safe from battle, or even activate their on-summon effects. Because unlike temporary banishing effects like Farfa, Forgotten Temple banishes, then specifically special summons the monster back later, instead of returning it as part of the banishing. It also pairs well with the monster Winged Tortoise, which special summons itself from the hand or grave when a face-up Fry-type monster you control is banished, so it's like you get free material. But keep in mind that while you can banish once per turn during either player's turn, they only get special summoned back during your end phase. This is a pretty sweet tech pick that lets you do some unique plays, and I just like the idea that a monster gets a little hideaway place to chill out for a bit. You know, get away from the stress of battle, maybe crack open a few snacks, a really mellow place, you know? Alright, that does it for all the cards that act as Umi. For now, let's take a look at some of our monsters, starting with the Levia Dragon line. Kodaris is a level 4 Water Sea Serpent monster with 1400 attack and 1200 defense, and you can send a face-up Umi you control to the grave to target up to 2 cards your opponent controls and send those targets to the grave. Now, if you're familiar with the Levia dragons, this may seem out of place, but fun fact I learned while researching, the Japanese name is a pun that highlights the fact that this is an infant version of those monsters, and the effect reflects that. They usually trade in an Umi you control for some removal, and this is a smaller version of that, only hitting 2 cards. The upside, though, is that it sends to grave so no on-destruction effects get triggered, and it doesn't hurt your cards, aside from, you know, losing an entire ocean. But let's see what happens when we grow up a bit. Levia Dragon Daedalus is a level 7 Water Sea Serpent monster with 2600 attack and 1500 defense, and it can send a face-up Umi you control to the grave to destroy all other cards on the field. Yup, it's a bad Zeus, but a bad Zeus is still a Zeus, especially if you don't have many cards to give up and your opponent overcommitted. And if you have a legendary ocean, this is only a single tribute away. But that's not the end of it, because if we want to be even more toxic, we can play Ocean Dragon Lord Neo Daedalus, a level 8 Water Sea Serpent monster with 2900 attack and 1600 defense that cannot be normal summoned or set, and must be special summoned by tributing a Levia Dragon Daedalus you control. It can send an Umi you control to the grave to send all cards in both players' hands and on the field to the grave except this card. Graveyard effects notwithstanding, this is a great way to ensure your opponent doesn't have any follow-up to contest your gigantic sea beast. Granted though, the grave is pretty busted, so they're likely to have something, so don't count on this being a win condition unless you have a bunch of graveyard cards that combo off of this. But between the hoops you have to jump through and the lack of a reliable game-ending effect, this is one Daedalus encounter I could do without. Maiden of Aqua is a level 4 Water Aqua monster with 700 attack and 2000 defense, and while there's no face-up field spell on the field is treated as Umi. This is probably one of my favorite examples of how much problem-solving card text really cleaned up the game, because the text was a mess beforehand. It had reminder text saying that it didn't apply Umi stat changes, it had 2 separate sentences explaining how the effect works and when it doesn't. Now it's just one succinct line. Mwah! Beautiful. But, you know, some of the effects of our Umi cards are pretty good, so we would rather be playing those instead of having Maiden substitute for it, especially now that field spells don't have to fight each other while on the field. Thankfully, she got an update recently with Yorishiro of Aqua, a level 4 Water Aqua monster with 700 attack and 2000 defense, and it can target a water monster in your grave and apply one of the following effects. Also, you can't special summon monsters for the rest of the turn except water monsters. If the target has a level, you can have Yorishiro take on its name and level until the end phase, and if Umi is on the field, you can special summon that monster in defense position. And if this card is in the grave, you can banish this card and target an Umi in your grave and add it to your hand. So it helps you get Umi, and while it's active, also gets you a free monster. If you can help it, that's probably the preferred option to use, though it is a shame it doesn't let you apply both effects if both are true. It would have been really big for the Xyz decks. Still, it's a nifty utility monster to tech into any deck with its own Umi, and is great company if you want to talk all things Kingdom Hearts related. You know, seeing as they're such a big Aqua stan. Mermaid Knight is a level 4 Aqua monster with 1500 attack and 700 defense, and while Umi is face up on the field, this card can attack twice during each battle phase. It also means it'll be about 1700 as well thanks to the field spell boost, making it a very decent double attacker, especially if you can supplement it with any other attack boosts. And it's not alone in being a vicious soldier while in the ocean. Deep Sea Warrior is a level 5 water warrior monster with 1600 attack and 1800 defense, and while Umi is on the field, this card is unaffected by any spell effects, which, as it turns out, includes Umi, so no attack buff for this one. However, if it's still in the hand, it will still benefit from the level reduction of a Legendary Ocean, so you can normal summon it. This means it can withstand a third of the game's cards by type, but will be more difficult to buff up thanks to the spell shield. Neither of these cards are really good enough to see modern play, but do have some fun applications in lower powered formats. And you're not gonna see me complaining about it. I'm more than okay with leaving Gansley behind. That guy sucks. Orca Mega Fortress of Darkness is a level 5 water sea serpent monster with 2100 attack and 1200 defense, and by tributing a torpedo fish on your side of the field, you can destroy a monster on the field, and if you tribute a cannonball spear shellfish, you can destroy a spell or trap card on the field. Now, this does fulfill the level 5 waters might as well be a part of the Legendary Ocean archetype, and a 2300 attack normal summon ain't nothing. But where's the actual Umi connection? Well, that comes from the monsters mentioned in Orca's text. Torpedo Fish is a level 3 water fish monster with 1000 attack and defense, and Cannonball Spear Shellfish is a level 2 water aqua monster with 1000 attack and defense. And like Deep Sea Warrior, while Umi is on the field, neither of them can be affected by any spell effects. This is a pretty neat mini-theme from a conceptual standpoint, but this would need a bit more infrastructure to consistently be useful. Maybe some kind of continuous spell that can get you the ammo monsters, but now I'm dipping into custom card territory, and I've already got a whole thing for that, which you can find on my Patreon. But I think it's safe to say that a level 5 monster requiring multiple smaller ones to feed its effect really torpedoed its chances. Abyss Strom is a normal trap card that sends an Umi you control to the grave to send all spell and trap cards on the field to the grave. This makes for the second Mermail adjacent card we've covered so far. We have got to stop meeting like this. It's basically a heavy storm at quick effect speed, and that's not without merit. At least, in general, you're about to see that we've got a lot of back row that's going to help us execute our various game plans, so it's not universally applicable, even across decks that run Umi. Still, I think it would have been funny if they named this card Heavy Strom. Come on, designers, you can't let me outpun you. Alright, now that we've covered a lot of generic Umi cards, let's focus in on the more dedicated archetypes under that umbrella, and I can't think of a better place to start with than Phantasm Spiral. If you want to be annoying and anti-meta, you can choose between this and Floodgate Turbo. Or, heck, just combine both of them if you want to tear apart your entire friend group. The theme revolves around the field spell card Pacifist the Phantasm City. It's always treated as Umi, and that's in its parenthetical text so you know it's serious. And once per turn, if you normal or special summon exactly one normal monster and no other cards, you add a Phantasm Spiral card from your deck to your hand. And if your opponent activates a card or effect except during the damage step and you control no tokens, you can special summon a Phantasm Spiral token, which is a level 8 water worm monster with 2000 attack and defense, which will trigger the effect that gives you a free card, because tokens are treated as normal monsters. And if you don't want to rely solely on a 2k token to handle things, you've also got Phantasm Spiral Dragon, a level 8 water worm monster with 2900 attack and defense. It's a ferocious serpent that was being hunted by Atlanteans. Battle-weary and ragged, it came across an ancient light and gained new strength for its battle. With its increased power, it launched an invasion of enemy territory with a renewed assault. That's right, this card used to be Spiral Serpent, but it went from Sea Serpent to Worm, got a whole new arsenal of support cards, and decided to use all that power to hunt down the poachers to make them the hunted ones. Though, since Spiral Serpent's flavor text says that it was destroying cities with its Spiral Wave attack, maybe Phantasm is at fault here? No, it's the Murlocs who are wrong. Phantasm Spiral Crash is an equipped spell card that you can only equip to a normal monster, a trend we'll see across all of the equips in this section. The equipped monster can deal piercing battle damage, and when the equipped monster inflicts battle damage to your opponent, you can special summon a Phantasm Spiral Dragon from your hand, deck, or grave, and equip it with this card. Then you can change an attack position monster your opponent controls to defense position. This card shows a lot about what the deck cares about. Ideally, we're equipping this to a token to get the bonus effect, fulfill some kind of condition, in this case dealing battle damage, and your prize is summoning out the big monster, passing the bonus off to it. And while the summon then equip change effect is once per turn, so you can't just keep doing it over and over again against a stacked field, you do still benefit from the piercing. And hey, you did just turn a monster sideways, ain't that keen. At that point, you're all ready to give it a try. A crash test, if you will. Phantasm Spiral Grip is an equipped spell card, and the equipped monster gains 500 attack. And when the equipped monster destroys an opponent's monster by battle, you can special summon a Phantasm Spiral Dragon from your hand, deck, or grave, equip it with this card, then burn your opponent for 1000 damage. This makes your monsters a bit beefier, and that extra burn damage can close things out in a pinch. And while you burn your opponent out, you get to grab some finger food. And with grippers like that, we're gonna need a lot. Phantasm Spiral Wave is an equipped spell card, and the first time the equipped monster would be destroyed by battle each turn, it is not. And at the end of the battle phase, if the equipped monster battled, you can special summon a Phantasm Spiral Dragon from your hand, deck, or grave. And if your opponent has any cards in hand, they discard a card. Yeah, this is, probably our worst card. Battle Protection makes a little sense with our token. There are a lot of monsters bigger than 2k, and while I'm not saying nothing is bigger than 2900, that kind of protection just isn't the same for bigger monsters. And the discard is just, look, just leave this card by the wayside, especially since we're up against Garunix on this one. That bird just got a whole structure deck treatment and is basically tier 0. We cannot step to that right now. Phantasm Spiral Assault is a normal trap card that targets a Phantasm Spiral Dragon you control. When it destroys 3 effect monsters your opponent controls by battle, while equipped with 3 or more Phantasm Spiral equipped cards with different names, you win the duel. And if Umi is on the field, you can activate this card from your hand, an aspect that all of our trap cards share, making them very flexible and powerful. And if any number of normal monsters you control would be destroyed by battle or card effect, you can banish this card from your grave instead. See, now that's a protection effect. Shame the rest of this card is just not really worth it. Like, having an alt win con is cool, don't get me wrong, and if you pull it off, yeah, you'll be the talk of the town. But remember, a single Spiral Dragon needs all 3 of the different equipped spells on, including the crummy one, and it needs to defeat 3 monsters. Effect ones at that, which may get strange against certain matchups. And if you lose that Phantasm Spiral Dragon at any point, you have to summon a new one, target it with another assault, and then repeat the whole thing all over again. You do you, but honestly, when I look at it, it's an assault on my dueling sensibilities. Phantasm Spiral Battle is a normal trap card, and if all the monsters you control are normal monsters, minimum 1, you can target a card your opponent controls and destroy it. You can also banish this card from your grave, then target a normal monster you control to equip that normal monster with all Phantasm Spiral equipped spells you control that can equip to it. So right off the bat, this is the preferred search target off of Pacifist. Having spot removal to deal with a card you can't otherwise mess with is pretty spiffy. And if you choose to run the equip spells, the Grave effect has a number of applications. You can swap them off a monster that's about to be destroyed, or you can move them to a new monster after the original holder has attacked. That way, if it wasn't able to fulfill the special summon requirements, you get a second shot. Or even to just keep the buff going across your attacks. Also, it's just cool to see Spiral Serpent taking center stage on this one so we get a timeline of events going on. That's right, it's lore time, baby! Forget the battle at Golgonda, this battle is where it's at. Phantasm Spiral Power is a normal trap card that, if all monsters you control are normal monsters, minimum 1, you can target an effect monster your opponent controls, and until the end of this turn, it loses 1000 attack and defense. Also, it has its effects negated. And you can banish this card from your grave, then target a normal monster you control to equip a Phantasm Spiral equip spell from your hand or grave to that normal monster. This is a pretty good companion to battle, acting as both imperm and a battle trick, helping to keep the battlefield locked down. Remember when I said that things don't get much bigger than 2900 earlier? Well, if they do, I'd much rather slap that monster with a big 1k reduction when they think they're about to run over our monster for a big push. Normal monster decks don't get a lot of respect, so you've got to plant your feet in the ground, or rather, fins in the water, and show them your power. Our next theme is one that came out of left field for a lot of us. Deep Sea Diva is a level 2 Water Sea Serpent Tuner monster with 200 attack and 400 defense, and when normal summoned, you can special summon a level 3 or lower Sea Serpent monster from your deck. When this card came out all the way back in May 2009, this was a really good monster, netting you a 1 card level 5 synchro, or 2 level 2 tuners to do with as you please. But when Eternity Code came out in June of 2020 and we got a whole Deep Sea archetype, that was pretty wild. And, as it turns out, its field spell is also always treated as Umi, so here we go. But before we do go, real quick, just know that they're all water sea serpent monsters, and so we're all above board. Deep Sea Warrior isn't in here because Deep Sea is all one word there, and Rage of the Deep Sea is more like Fry type support rather than having anything to do with us. Capiche? Let's go ahead and cover that field spell first. Magalonica, the Deep Sea City, is, like I said earlier, always treated as Umi, and when this card is activated, you can place a water monster from your deck on top of your deck. Once per turn, you can target a water monster you control and increase its level by 1 or 2 until the end of this turn, even if this card leaves the field. And once per turn, during your main phase, if you special summon a water synchro monster, you can look at your opponent's hand, and if you do, banish a card from it face up until the end phase. So the level modulation ties in pretty well with what we already know about Deep Sea Diva. It'll help make synchro summoning. God, why do so many Umi cards mess with levels? This leads into the last effect, rewarding you for syncing by hand-ripping your opponent temporarily, which is another thing Deep Seas are going to be doing. This just leaves us with that first effect. Stacking your deck doesn't do anything on its own, but we do have a lot of cards that mill, so being able to set that up is going to be pretty tasty. We'll see how all that meshes together in just a bit, but honestly, I'm just happy we get an honest-to-goodness city here for once. So many of these field spells are just dilapidated ruins. About time we brought some color back to this scene, you know? Deep Sea Artisan is a level 1 monster with 0 attack and 500 defense, and if this card is added from the deck or grave to your hand by the effect of a water monster, you can reveal this card to look at your opponent's hand. And if this card is special summoned, you can send the top card of your deck to the grave, then target a level 4 or lower water monster in your grave, accept a copy of this card, and special summon it, but negate its effects. So if you drag this out from Deep Sea Diva, you also get to summon a monster from the grave, though only as a body. We don't get to benefit from any of its effects. But you'll have to make sure your grave has a target first, cause you can't count on that mill to get you a friend, unless of course you activated Magalonica. That being said, this does highlight how much of a non-bow we have between Diva and Magalonica. Check this out. If you set a card on top of your deck, then use Deep Sea Diva to summon from the deck, you've now wasted your whole effort, because now that you've summoned a monster from the deck, you have to shuffle it around, so now your top deck is unknown. But if you do manage to thread the needle, you can supplement their 3 levels with up to 4, meaning anything from 3 to 7 is up for grabs. Not to mention the extra 1 or 2 from our field spell. And if you recycle it, you get to take a peek at what your opponent has hiding. But it does have to be added by the effect of a water monster, so no using salvage for free info. Sadly. But we do have an on-theme card that can help with that coming up soon, helping you to craft the right strategy. Deep Sea Sentry is a level 2 monster with 400 attack and 2000 defense, and if this card is sent to the grave to activate a water monster's effect, you can make your opponent banish a card from their hand face up until the end phase. If this card is special summoned, you can send the top 2 cards of your deck to the grave, then target a level 4 or lower water monster in your grave, accept a copy of this card, and add it to your hand. So if Artisan is in the grave, we can bring this out with Diva, add Artisan to our hand, then take a peek at our opponent's. Or if we do end up milling this for someone else's effect, cause we do mill his cost, thank you semicolon, our opponent has to lose a card for the turn. Or longer if we can help it. This gives us more options to help with our approach to dealing with our opponent, either by letting us hit a card or take a look at the whole thing, which will probably be the better option if your opponent's grip is huge. If we let our opponent choose the card they banish, they'll always pick the least impactful one to guard their information. Deep Sea Minstrel is a level 3 tuner monster with 1200 attack and 1500 defense, and you can discard this card and a water monster to look at your opponent's hand and banish a card from it face up until the end phase. And if this card is special summoned, you can send the top 3 cards of your deck to the grave, then target a level 4 or lower water monster in your grave, accept a copy of this card, and place it either on the top or bottom of the deck. This may not be the best card to summon off of Diva, especially since it's also a tuner, but hey, nothing's stopping you from using them as link material. The big draw is gonna be that in-hand effect, because not only do you get to scout out your opponent's hand and phase out their most problematic card, there are several monsters in this sphere that gain effects when sent to the grave for the effect of a water monster. We have Sentry, but also a whole host of Atlantean monsters, so even if you aren't playing Deep Sea as a whole, taking this into your water deck to act as an enabler and a way to insulate your plays is pretty high performance. A bardic performance, if you will. Quick shout out to Guitar Grunard's Dueling, a level 3 monster with 1500 attack and 700 defense that is a non-tuner, so we can technically sync this with Diva, and if special summoned, banishes cards from the top of your opponent's deck equal to the number of water monsters you control. So if you summon it off of Diva, you get to mill too. It can target a level 4 or lower water monster you control and change its level to double its original level, great for both synchro and Xyz summoning, and you can banish this card from your grave to give one water monster on the field 100 attack for each banished monster until the end of the turn. Honestly, this card is ridiculously cracked, helping Diva to make level 5, 7, and 8 synchro monsters, all while peeling away more cards from your opponent and giving you a little extra boost if need be. I'd even go so far as to say that it'll be the basest of your strategy. Deep Sea Repetiteur is a level 5 synchro monster with 1800 attack and 1500 defense, requiring Deep Sea Diva and one or more non-tuner monsters as material. Once per turn, as a quick effect, you can discard a level 4 or lower water monster to have this card gain 800 attack until the end of the turn, and if this synchro summoned card is sent to the grave, you can target a level 5 or higher water monster in your grave, accept a copy of this card, and special summon it in defense position. But you cannot special summon monsters for the rest of the turn, except water monsters. Yep, no getting around this one. You're really going to want to have a non-tuner to summon off of Diva if you want access to this, cause we're looking at a monster reborn of a big monster once you synchro climb with this. Granted, we don't have a lot of good options for this, but Minstrel can pitch a water to set up your grave, grabbing you monsters like Kaiser Sea Snake for a quick rank 4, Infernal Queen Salmon to summon out its king, or Rock Scales as a way to steal a monster. You can also pick from any of the many level 5 or higher monsters we've talked about so far, or are about to, so they can make a Repetiteur performance. Deep Sea Prima Donna is a level 7 synchro tuner monster with 1500 attack and 2700 defense, requiring generic material. Your opponent can't target a synchro monster that uses this card as material with monster effects, and you can target one of your opponent's banished cards and either add to hand or special summon a level 4 or lower water monster from your deck, and if you do, add that banished card back to their hand. And if this card is sent to the grave, you can target one banished card and shuffle it into the deck. That is a lot to take in, but the important part is that this monster takes the temporary banishes from your other Deep Sea monsters and makes them permanent. Mostly. The one that summons a monster from your deck does immediately give that card back to your opponent, but if you don't do anything, they'll get it back anyway, so you might as well benefit from it. And when this goes to the grave, preferably as synchro material, you can take one of those temporary banished cards and stick it right back into the deck. Or we can recycle one of our own. You thankfully get a choice in the matter. And speaking of the material, adding targeting protection ain't too shabby, though it only working on monster effects feels a little lame. Like, if you manage to make a level 7 tuner work for you, you should probably get more than conditional targeting protection. Still, this card is a bundle of value and integrated into the right lines of play, helping you to make the most of your synchros by carrying a good tuner. Deep Sea Aria is a normal spell card that banishes a water monster from your grave to add a level 4 or lower Sea Serpent monster from your deck to your hand. Thankfully, this can trigger Artisan to look at the opponent's hand, and otherwise just gets all the members of our theme into the hand. It also has a lot of applications in other themes as well. Some of the best Gishki monsters are Sea Serpents, not to mention the Atlanteans. And if Sea Serpents ever get their time in the spotlight, like Rocks once did and Pyros are now, this is sure to become a sleeper hit, not only tying together these themes mechanically, but doing a lot of lore building in its own right. Having the mermaids in the audience is to be expected, but Aqua actresses, now that's a cameo. Alright, that covers just about everything else. Now it's time for the last bundle of support, because Umi wouldn't be the influential card it is today without the deep sea duelist looking to follow in his father's footsteps. Now, we may laugh at how the Duelist Kingdom battle emphasized the nonsense you were allowed to get away with when field spells were involved, not to mention the whole attacking the moon debacle, but it did lay the groundwork for actual design that we'd see in the game. So this section is a tribute to any of Mako Tsunami's signature cards. We're starting things off with Doom Kraken, a level 4 water aqua monster with 1400 attack and 1600 defense, based on the old normal monster Fiend Kraken, a level 4 water normal monster with 1200 attack and 1400 defense. Now, normally retrains keep the same attack and defense as their older counterparts to stay consistent, but remember, Umi boosts these stats by 200. We're going to be seeing that reference crop up a lot over the next few cards. Anyway, as a quick effect, if Umi is on the field, you can target a water monster you control, except a copy of this card, and one monster your opponent controls. Special summon this card from your hand, and if you do, return that monster you control to the hand, and if you do, destroy that opponent's monster. And when an opponent's monster declares an attack, you can return this card to the hand, and if you do, negate the attack. This puts Doom Kraken in the interesting position of being both an interactive hand trap and a way to blank a battle phase, with the various monsters moving in and out of your hand, mimicking the creatures of the deep violently surfacing to cause havoc before sinking back into the inky depths, waiting to strike again. The in-hand effect is quite strong, though the on-field one is a bit too telegraphed for my liking. All your opponent needs is one piece of removal, and they'll have put a big crack in your setup. Electric Jellyfish is a level 4 water aqua monster with 1400 attack and 1700 defense, based on the old normal monster Jellyfish, a water aqua monster with 1200 attack and 1500 defense. You can send an Umi from your hand, deck, or face-up field to the gravest cost to special summon a water monster from your hand. And when your opponent activates a monster effect or spell card or effect while Umi is on the field as a quick effect, you can negate that effect. Then you can make this card gain a permanent 600 attack and defense boost. Out of all the new Mako cards, this is the one that's most dangerous. While it's not an Omni-Negate, covering monster and spell effects is pretty close, and you're gonna have to sequence your moves properly because there's only a small window of opportunity where this is tiny enough to be reasonably attacked before its stats skyrocket. And while sending a copy of our limited Umi supply to the graveyard sounds like a bad idea, trust me, it's actually a benefit, especially since our other cards like Yorishiro of Aqua can get them back for you. Honestly, I wish some of the decks I played could do stuff like this. I'm super jelly. Ocean Dragon Lord Kairyushin is a level 5 water sea serpent monster with 2000 attack and 1700 defense, based on the old normal monster Kairyushin, a level 5 water sea serpent monster with 1800 attack and 1500 defense. While Umi is on the field, each player can only control one face-up non-water monster, and if there are 2 or more that fit the non-water bill, they must send them to the grave so that they only control one. During your main phase, you can add from your deck to your hand an Umi, a Kairyushin spell or trap card, or a Sea Stealth spell or trap card. If Electric Jellyfish was one of the most dangerous cards in this arsenal, Kairyushin is easily the most annoying, cause yeah, it's got a strong goes and match style effect, and as it turns out, water isn't exactly a widely used attribute. This shuts down a wide variety of decks, and the pain doesn't stop there, because every turn this monster is getting you a free card to help tighten your grip on the game. Heck, if the Umi you're playing is a legendary ocean, and let's be real, it is, you can just normal summon this monster. Until the developers get their rears in gear and make a format where water is the dominant archetype, this is always going to be a hell to deal with, especially if paired up with Electric Jellyfish to stop opposing answers. Our previous Ocean Dragon Lord, Levia Dragon, may clear the board, but Kairyushin keeps everyone off of it in the first place. And while this does emulate Yugi's predicament in his duel against Mako, you're not going to be so lucky as to have a moon to attack to solve your problem. Oh, but if you do manage to get out from under this by using the spell card Attack the Moon, you really should just get to win by default. This next section revolves around a series of cards that embody the soul and principles of Mako's role model, his late father. The Legendary Fisherman is a level 5 water warrior monster with 1850 attack and 1600 defense, and while Umi is on the field, it's unaffected by spell effects and can't be targeted for attacks, though also does not prevent your opponent from attacking you directly. Like with Deep Sea Warrior, while a Legendary Ocean is on the field, you can normal summon this without a tribute, but the attack boost won't help you. Though, since it can't be attacked under those circumstances, you're not going to have to worry much about retaliation. That being said, this card doesn't really accomplish a whole lot for us, especially in modern times, so our Hunter of Finful Spoils is gonna need an upgrade. The Legendary Fisherman 2 is a level 5 Water Warrior monster with 2200 attack and 1800 defense, whose name becomes the Legendary Fisherman while on the field or in the grave. While Umi is on the field, it's unaffected by other monster effects, very nifty, and if this face-up card is destroyed by battle or leaves the field because of an opponent's card effect while in its owner's control, you can add a level 7 water monster from your deck to your hand. Now this one slaps. The monster immunity means that it still covers a very important card type, while also benefiting from our field spell boost, bumping it up to a healthy 2400 attack normal summon under a Legendary Ocean. When it comes to the floating effect, the level 7 water monster pool is, pun not intended but very appreciated, very shallow. There are a number of mermails, Ursarctic, and Ice Jade monsters you can grab, some whales we'll be talking about shortly, Fog King if you need a niche floodgate to stop tributes, or you could even get out Super Ancient Deep Sea King Coelacanth. But the one that you know they intended for you to grab is the Legendary Fisherman 3, a level 7 Water Warrior monster with 2500 attack and 2000 defense that cannot be normal summoned or set, and must be special summoned from your hand by tributing a Legendary Fisherman. When this card is special summoned, you can banish all monsters your opponent controls. Also, this card can't attack this turn. It can't be destroyed by battle or card effects, and is also unaffected by spell and trap effects. And that applies even if Umi isn't on the field. And once per turn, you can return as many of your opponent's banished cards as possible to their grave, and if you do, the first battle or effect damage your opponent takes this turn becomes doubled. Now, quick aside here, this is actually not a Mako Tsunami card. This was used by a fellow named Trout in Arc V, who has no connection to their DM counterpart as far as I can tell. It's also strange because, in order of release date, we got Legendary Fisherman 3 before too, so we had this strange period of mystery before Mako's Legendary Duelist pack arrived, where we had no idea if there was gonna ever be a Legendary Fisherman 2. As for the card itself, well, needing to tribute the Legendary Fisherman is a pretty tall task. While nifty monsters, neither of them are particularly strong, and while you can search this out with Legendary Fisherman 2's effect, it does so after being destroyed, so it won't be around to act as tribute for 3, meaning you'll have to either revive 2 or find another Fisherman altogether. Which is a shame because the effect being a one-sided banishing board wipe is honestly incredible. This card can't attack, sure, but everything else can. And with that damage doubling effect, your other monsters are going to be quite a bit more lethal than the competition might know. Still, until we get a proper Legendary Fisherman archetype, the prospect of summoning this out is going to be a little fishy. Next, we have Mako's other iconic monster from his Battle City duel against Joey. Fortress Whale is a level 7 water fish ritual monster with 2350 attack and 2150 defense that you can ritual summon with Fortress Whale's Oath, which is a bog standard early ritual spell. All it does is get out Fortress Whale. That being said though, it's pretty trash. It's got a middling attack stat for a monster that needs 7 levels to summon, and as it turns out, this is actually a non-bow with a Legendary Ocean. See, Oath isn't looking for you to tribute levels equal to or exceeding Fortress Whale's level, it's looking for 7. And because a Legendary Ocean reduces all of your water levels in hand and on the field by 1, you actually have to pay more for Fortress Whale when it's on the field than you should have to. Thankfully, its future iteration decided to step away from the ritual angle and just made it a regular main deck effect monster, thank goodness. Citadel Whale is a level 7 water fish monster with 2350 attack and 2150 defense, and if this card is in your hand or grave, you can tribute 2 water monsters to special summon this card. And if special summoned in any way, you can set a sea stealth attack directly from your deck. And once per turn, when your opponent activates a card or effect that targets a water monster you control and no other cards, as a quick effect, you can negate the activation, and if you do, destroy that card. So while on the field, it's a one-time targeting negation once per turn, and gets us one of our support cards when summoned. The summon itself, though, is pretty costly, but not without its upsides. Turns out the summon isn't inherent, it's an activated effect. So if you tribute any water monsters who trigger their effects if sent to the grave to activate a water monster's effect, you do end up with some value. We also get to use a bunch of generic fish support that we've recently been given thanks to Goaty and the white cards. But I think the pinnacle of whale-based artillery can be found with Mega Fortress Whale. A level 7 water fish monster with 2550 attack and 2350 defense, there's that Umi boost reference coming back to us, and if Umi is on the field you can activate this effect, letting your water monsters attack directly this turn. During your opponent's battle phase, as a quick effect, you can target a face-up monster your opponent controls and destroy it, and if this card on the field is destroyed by battle or card effect, you can either add to your hand or special summon a water warrior monster from your deck or grave. This is pretty cool because it retroactively makes our legendary fisherman that much better. Because 2 mimics the name of 1, we don't have to play 1 if our goal is to summon 3, and now we can just pull 2 out of our deck for free. Or if we already have 2 in rotation, we can nab 3 from the deck so we can complete the summon. But looking at what else Mega Fortress Whale can do, why would you even bother? Not only is it huge, not only does it punish your opponent for going into the battle phase, it lets all of your water monsters attack directly for no drawback. This means the enemy lineup won't matter outside of what effects they can use to stop you, because otherwise you're going to be able to walk right past them and swing in for game. The only real issue here is, being level 7, you're gonna have to pay at least 1 tribute if you're under a legendary ocean to normal summon this, and we don't have a ton of on-theme ways to turbo this onto the board, at least in a way that lets us take full advantage of its effects. Still, I'd count this among our power players in a control-oriented version of the deck, because once your opponent is on the defensive, Mega Fortress can hit the field and ignore most of what they've built up. And no matter what, the story you bring back to your friends after that duel is gonna be a whale of a tale. Alright, now it's time for some spells and traps. Fish Sonar is a normal spell card that adds a level 7 or lower monster from your deck to your hand that mentions Umi or is a water normal monster. Then if Umi is on the field, you can special summon a water normal monster from your deck. This isn't tied to Mako in the anime, but it did come out in one of the packs featuring support for him, so I'm including it here. Not to mention it has a connection to the normal water monster theme that we'll see later on. This is a fantastic way to get a hold of any monster we've covered in this section, as well as monsters like BUGROTH and the Maidens of Aqua. But the best part is the free normal monster summon. If we run this in Pacifist, this cheats Phantasm Spiral Dragon right onto the field, but in general, Terror King Salmon is the preferred option. Under a legendary ocean, you can normal summon it for free as a 2600 attack monster and gives you another reason to play Infernal Queen Salmon, an effect monster with the same stats as Terror King, which can summon it for free, giving you a huge pile of damage right on the spot, and a bunch of link material if your opponent decides to retaliate. This powerful and versatile card should be considered for a number of decks that run Umi-related cards, letting you use the normal monster as a battering ram, or as the exact material you need for an Xyz or Synchro summon. Now I just gotta find a way to figure out what this sonar is saying so I know what's actually going on here. Next up, we have the cards you can search off of our new Ocean Dragon Overlord, the Kyriushin cards. Fury of Kyriushin is a normal spell card that adds the card Torrential Tribute from your deck to your hand. And if any number of water monsters you control would be destroyed by card effect, you can banish this card from your grave instead. And just so we're all on the same page, Torrential Tribute is a normal trap card that you can activate when any number of monsters are summoned, to destroy all monsters on the field. It's basically a trap card version of Dark Hole, and it's seen its fair share of high-end play over the years. And as the anime has shown, it is a Mako Tsunami card. But with the help of Kyriushin, this can turn Torrential Tribute into a trap card Raigeki instead, letting you banish this card from your grave to keep all of your water monsters safe. But that still hasn't been enough to push this deck into competitive viability. And honestly, I can see where Kyriushin is coming from. If I went through all that effort to be taken seriously and it didn't do anything, I'd be pretty furious too. Rage of Kyriushin is a quick play spell card that you can activate if Umi is on the field. It targets monsters your opponent controls up to the number of water monsters you control whose original levels are 5 or higher, destroy them, and if you do, the zones they were in cannot be used until the end of the next turn. This can be pretty savage. Even if you only have the one Kyriushin, it's a pop that floods the zone, and we get to scale that up the more we develop our own board. This is especially brutal against Link decks, as this is one of the few zone lock cards that can work on the extra monster zone, keeping your opponent from summoning any Link monsters until the effect wears off, unless they are exceedingly clever. And even without that, it's just quick speed removal that Ocean Dragon Lord Kyriushin can search. Seems like a pretty good setup to me. I don't know what they're so angry about. Kairyushin's Dark Reef is a normal trap card that sends a face-up Umi you control to the grave to special summon up to 2 monsters with different names from your hand and or deck that mention Umi or are water normal monsters in defense position. Then, if your opponent controls a monster, lets you special summon any number of level 6 or lower water normal monsters from your hand and or deck, but until the end of the next turn, after this card resolves, you can't special summon monsters except water ones. While slow, this is going to be our primary means of deploying our Umi monsters. Ocean Dragon Lord Kairyushin is one of the bigger choices, especially because it can replace the Umi we sent to grave. And it also gets Mega Fortress Whale. Electric Jellyfish isn't half bad as long as you have another Umi to activate for its effect, same with Doom Kraken, and if you don't have one active, well, that's what Maiden of Aqua was printed for. Yorishiro is also pretty good, because once you get an Umi active, it's a monster reborn that gets you even more material for your board. And let's not forget there's also Kodaris and Levia Dragon Daedalus, in case we need even more removal. And of course, if you love water normal monsters, you'll be swimming in material after you resolve this. Which is kind of funny, because for all the references we've made to the DM Mako duel and the moon attacking ridiculousness, this takes the odd lose condition Mako was under, subverts it, and shows it as a positive. Now that the ocean is gone, all the sea beasties that were deep below are now exposed, so you'll have to find a good way to make use of them. Or should I say, we'll see what you can make with them? And speaking of seas, it's time for another batch of themed cards. Sea Stealth Attack is a continuous trap card that, when activated, lets you activate an Umi from your hand or grave. And while Umi is on the field, this card gains the following effects. Once per turn, you can banish a water monster you control until the end phase, and this turn, face-up spell and trap cards you control can't be destroyed by your opponent's card effects, even if this card leaves the field. And at the start of the damage step, if your water monster whose original level is 5 or higher battles an opponent's monster, destroy that opponent's monster. Wow, this card is just the whole package. So you get an Umi, even one from your grave, which pairs very well with Electric Jellyfish. Then it takes all your big waters and turns them into El Shaddoll constructs. But it's the middle effect that we've got to talk about here. Temporarily banishing a water is a pretty small price to pay to keep all of your face-up spells and traps safe. It takes pressure off of Electric Jellyfish to act as the saving grace for your cards, but the main issue is that it works on all of your face-up spell and trap cards, not just ones associated with Umi, which means this deck is primed to use some of the game's most powerful floodgates. Ocean Dragon Lord Kairyushin is bad enough. That plus Gozen Match doesn't even give you the wiggle room to summon out an additional monster. But with this, you can get away with some ridiculous skill drain nonsense. You can activate the effect of one of your water monsters, then chain Sea Stealth Attack's effect to keep all of your spells and traps safe. This includes temporarily banishing them, which gets them off the field before the effect can properly resolve. And because Skill Drain only hits monsters who are on the field, you still get to use all of your effects while your opponent flounders. And on top of that, it also helps keep Skill Drain safe. This card is a menace, no doubt about it, but every time I look at it, I wonder when we're getting the Panther Warrior retrains. I mean, everything else is getting one, like Flame Swordsman. Why not make a little room for Joey's most prolific Goat Eater? Sea Stealth 2 is a continuous spell card whose name becomes Umi while on the field or in the grave, meaning we can recover it with Yorishiro or activate it with Sea Stealth Attack. While on the field, your opponent can't target water monsters you control with non-water monster effects, and at the start of the battle phase, you can special summon from your hand or grave a monster that mentions Umi or is a water normal monster in defense position, but destroy it at the end of the battle phase. This is probably why Mega Fortress Whale's direct attack effect is an activated one instead of a continuous one. Otherwise, it would be way too easy to cheat this into play and let you go for lethal with other monsters. Still, it's a fantastic piece of support that covers a variety of situations. The non-water monster targeting protection is pretty snazzy, the free monster can be a nifty blocker, and because it works during both battle phases, you can bring back Mega Fortress during your opponent's turn, blast a monster with the effect, and when it blows itself up thanks to Sea Stealth 2's effect, you get to search out a water warrior. Also, while you wouldn't be able to keep it under these circumstances, summoning out an Ocean Dragon Lord Kairyushin even for just a little bit against an established board is a great way to deflate your opponent. And if nothing else, it's a spare Umi you can trade in for your other effects that aren't a legendary ocean. I don't know if the sequel is better than the original here, but it sure is putting in the work. But you can't tell me there's anything stealthy about this card. That whale is flying over the sea, for Pete's sake. It's not even hiding in the waves. The last card we need to touch on is Tornado Wall, a continuous trap card that you can activate while Umi is on the field. And while Umi is face up on the field, you take no battle damage from attacking monsters, but you destroy this card when Umi leaves the field. As far as Playground Yu-Gi-Oh goes, this was one of the most annoying cards you could run into. Without proper back row removal, sometimes the kid across from you would just sit there all smug while they built up their resources, and you couldn't do anything. It was a total pain, but nowadays, dealing with this shouldn't really be a problem. And I mean, you shouldn't be building anything using tornadoes anyway, especially for walls. Not for any structural purposes, maybe you're a wind elemental, I'm not here to judge, but you'll never be able to escape the "wow, looks like a tornado blew through here" jokes. It's better to just not give them the ammo. Alright, so that's all of the Umi cards, but what do we do with them? Well, we've actually got a lot of different themes and playstyles to choose from here. Phantasm Spiral doesn't play well with effect monsters in general, and thus won't be splashed with just about any other member of this video. Deep Sea is looking to play Synchro Combo, and Umi Control, the colloquial name for the Mako cards, is going to want to play, Control. So this tech pick section is less about how we enhance the strengths and shore up the weaknesses of a particular strategy, and more about other general support cards we may want to keep in mind. First up are a couple of stupendous rank 4 monsters. First up is Bahamut Shark, taking any 2 level 4 monsters and using them to access any number of rank 3 or lower Water Xyz monsters. The go-to is usually totally awesome, and it's not hard to see why. A free Omni Negate is pretty good, especially if you can feed it other Aqua monsters so this one can stay on field. But another annoying option is Acid Golem of Destruction. It'll already be summoned with no material for maximum toxicity levels, so it's just one creature swap away from being a bad time for your opponent. But if you want to be extra cheeky, you can summon Rebarian Shark, then link it off to put a rank up magic, the 7th one, on top of your deck for a real barn burner of a play. The second rank 4 is Stealth Kraken, one of the most annoying monsters ever printed. By turning all face-up monsters on the field into water monsters, it can ping anything with its quick effect pop that also burns, and it makes Goes in Match even more painful to play against. No matter what you have on field, if you too are not playing a water deck, now you're locked out of any other monster. And if that wasn't bad enough, it can float into Stealth Kraken spawns that can also pop monsters and can float back into the original Stealth Kraken. As far as control win conditions go, this is one of the best, no doubt about it. Abyss Dweller may not be specifically for water decks, but does work best with us, giving a big 500 attack boost to all of your water monsters as long as a water monster is one of its material. And locking down the grave is a pretty good way to limit your opponent's options. Abyss Keeper is a link monster you'll want to keep on hand as a way to get Mega Fortress Whale onto the field from your hand, letting you use the attacking directly effect right out of the gate. Abyss Shark and other members of the Shark crew give you some free material to use for Xyz summoning, but this is the only one that only water locks you and not Xyz locks you. So while this card is going to be generally helpful, you'll want to be more careful if you want to run things like Crystal Shark. Ice Barrier is also another really potent card. The trap card specifically, not the archetype. The on-field effect is pretty strong, but once we get it into the grave with the help of cards like Foolish Burial Goods, we can vent our big waters into the grave, then recover a water from the grave, putting it into our hand. This means you can use this as a lesser fish sonar, or we can grab a different monster from our grave back, then keep the big water in grave so we can revive it with Sea Stealth too. Either way, it's a flexible support option that also comes with a brutal battle trick. There's also, Barrier Statue of the Torrent. Do what you gotta do, I suppose. As for a silly tech pick, it's hard to recommend anything but Click and Echo. This doesn't mesh with very many summoning methods, including tributing, but links are one of the most splashable extra deck mechanics in the game, so it shouldn't be too hard to slot that in. And using these two mischievous creatures as material for it means you get total knowledge of your opponent's hand, letting you know exactly how to navigate your opponent's options. Granted, if they stick around, then your opponent's going to get to link those off and get to know your hand, but A, you can always just pop them before they get to use it, and B, even if they do manage to do that, your hand is likely empty because you've played everything out. Alright, with all that info under our belts, how do these cards stack up against the Nova scale? Since we've got a lot of themes here, we're gonna need to turbocharge through these real quick. So first off, Phantasm Spiral. Novelty, it gets a 5 out of 5. While general stun decks headlined by Inspector Border have been around for a while, Phantasm Spiral being built around the interactions of a single giant normal or a specific token is something we wouldn't see until arguably Adventure. But that deck operates on such a completely different axis that it's hardly applicable. Objectivity, it's getting a 4 out of 5. While I don't want to dock points for them being a control deck because they're annoying, that would put a bias on a particular playstyle that I don't want to introduce here. That's for the awesomeness section. My problem is, and it's something that pilots of the theme themselves would agree on, is that Pacifist is such a mess in how the card actually functions and how it's worded that it takes a dedicated college course to understand it, which is murder on the brain in the middle of a tournament run. Versatility, 1 out of 5. The deck does everything it can to keep you off anything but its core cards. Even decks that utilize non-effect monsters like Tenyi are propped up by their effect monsters, so you're just about always playing this pure. Awesomeness, 2 out of 5. There's some pride to be had in piloting this deck effectively, but half the cards just suck. The equipped spells are difficult to justify, and one of the trap cards, arguably the best things about this deck, is just unplayable, which feels very bad. So Phantasm Spirals get a 12 out of 20 on the Nova scale. Next up is Deep Sea. Novelty, 2 out of 5. Water is the attribute of the hand rip, so making a whole water theme around that concept is pretty on theme. Not to mention we're building off of an old card. The synchro climbing element is a bit fresh, but not by much. Objectivity, 5 out of 5. You have to jump through so many hoops when it comes to using this deck, and any hand ripping the theme does requires follow-up to actually make it permanent. Otherwise, you have an archetype built entirely of Light Force swords. Versatility, 2 out of 5. This has some minor synergy with our water monsters that care about being used for water monster effects, and Deep Sea Diva is a pretty swell enabler for synchro plays in general. But keep an eye out because this number can only go up once Sea Serpents become a headlining type and Deep Sea Aria gets more search targets. Awesomeness, 3 out of 5. It's cool to see an old card get a new suite of support to flesh them out, but honestly, these cards don't feel like they function as a coherent whole, and I can't imagine anyone getting jazzed about kinda hand rips and only making them permanent about 30% of the time. So Deep Sea Divas are getting a 12 out of 20 on the Nova scale. Lastly, we have Umi Control. Novelty, 4 out of 5. While we're building on the existing Umi infrastructure, previously we had cards that just benefited from having a field spell with that name, not an actual deck built around the concept, so it's good to see that that's finally come to pass. Objectivity, 3 out of 5. Floodgates are very divisive. You either really enjoy keeping your opponent from doing anything, or you think they're Satan's own gift to the game. Me? I love doing the first, but recognize the latter. If Kyriushin was the only one at their disposal, I might have given him a bit more leniency. But when you factor in Sea Stealth Attack being probably the best floodgate insulator in the game, letting you play all manner of unfun nonsense, it really puts this over the top. Versatility, 2 out of 5. The deck welcomes any kind of water monster synergy, but until we get a Year of Water, we aren't exactly going to have a lot of impactful cards to splash in, outside of the niche cards we've mentioned already. So expect lists to be pretty uniform, and don't expect a lot of Kyriushin locks in other decks. Awesomeness, 5 out of 5. Look, I know that sounds strange after I gave such blistering reviews of the other sections, but awesomeness is for me. I do hate that it's such a good home for floodgates, but there's always something so cool about seeing all these old anime cards not only being brought up to modern standards, but doing it in a way that emulates how they actually worked in the anime. This means that Umi Control gets a 14 out of 20 on the Nova scale. And that about does it for the Umi cards. Wow, that was a lot. I did not realize there were so many cards under this umbrella. But it's cool to see how this card has been used, how it's evolved, and what kinds of playstyles have attached themselves to it. There's an ocean's worth of opportunities out there to explore, and while we've seen a lot of different Umi ideas, it's been very shallow dips, and I'm looking forward to seeing what happens when we get some releases that really take a deeper dive. But now, I want to hear what you all have to say. Are any of these decks poised to rise from the deep to crash into the competition? Or are they still going to need a bit more oomph before they become the wave of the future? Let me know down below, as well as which one's your favorite, and if you haven't already, please be sure to like the video if you liked it, subscribe so you don't miss an episode, and share this video with somebody you know who loves Yu-Gi-Oh! It really does a lot to help me out. Today's episode is brought to you by my patrons, as well as the wonderful people over at Dragon Shield. Get the sleeves as strong as dragon scales and save 5% on your order by using the coupon code GoldenNova at checkout. Today's episode was also brought to you by my lovely patrons, including this month's illustrious Quasar Commanders Sir Knight JCB and the Critic of Innocence, Nebula Navigator's 3rd Dynasty, Ada Basilisk, Adam Zajdel, Andrew Newman, Kane Senpai, Christopher Fuss, Clockswork, Dark Dragon X830, Emony Chan, Eric, Aaron the World Breaker, Frankie, Garland Chaos, Green Knight, Gloomba 331, Great Big Pillock, Groog, Hairbear, Harry the Ominous Benefactor, Howling Zangetsu, Iron Zero, Iskander 711, Carp, Mana Charge, Marion James E. Picata, Mega Combi, Millennia Asta, Muzuki Clark, Nathan Vig, Natiel Lee Alexander, Orozco 09096, Panther J, Rebel King Lucifer, Red Eyes Jackalow, RJ the Jank Monarch, Sammy Haim, Serenity Towns, Skybuster Leo, That One Dumbass and the Wizard Moose, Cosmic Crusaders Alpha Sly, Almento 5010, Anansi Dragon, A Random Pup, Ariel Kersey, Beluga Master, Blitzwolf, Blue Gem, Borger with a Shotgun, Callum McCann, Jazz Ghost, Childish Lamar, Dr. Reaper RIP, Drachenwald, Eki Bullock, Eva Padilla, Hike Boyagian, Herbal D, Ignis Heat the True Draco Slayer, Inblink, Jester Designs, Kale the Dragon, Keyvon Public, King Scarlet Yu-Gi-Oh!, Kim Smiley Face, Lemon Yu-Gi-Oh!, Lord Whoop-De-Doo, Manga Pages, Marluxia's a Girl, Matt Simmons, Mick Spoofy, Michael Shimabukuro, Misty, Nitromo, Ramen Resurrect Chan, Shizuki Nijimura, Sophie, apparently, Stephen Williamson, Taylor Seymour, the legendary Raven, and Zal Dreka, as well as the wonderful Starlight Explorers you see on screen now. If you'd like to help me in my journey to cover all of Yu-Gi-Oh's archetypes, get my videos early, be a part of these credits and other awesome perks, it would mean the world to me if you would check out the link to my Patreon in the description or consider joining as a YouTube member. And if you'd like to see another water theme that, like Deep Sea, love to synchro summon, check out this video I made covering Crystron. Thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye. This means we can use it as a lesser Fisher sonar. Fisher sonar. A lesser Fisher price. Now it stores near you.